Hi, Jim. It's an honor to have you today in Belgium, in Mons, for this masterclass of 3 days. You were not talking about cooking, but about animation.
Yes.
Because you have an important role. What is this role?
Well, I'm the president of the Pixar Animation Studios, and so I work with a lot of very talented people to make movies, to hopefully entertain people.
Yeah, long career. So we're going to begin with the company Pixar, because it's a household name in the world of animation. My first question is, what do you think has been the key to Pixar's success over the years? If you have an answer, of course.
Well, Pixar made the first computer-generated animated film, so
Exactly.
we've been in the business for a long time. But I think the success of the company is really the way we've approached making the films, which is to try to base each one of them around an emotional idea, an idea that comes from the director that we then help to grow and change over time. But so that the films kind of have the underpinning of hopefully something that's relatable and authentic to everybody, something about the human experience that's there. And then, of course, we add comedy and other entertainment stuff.
Exactly.
But I think at the heart of it, we try to find something that's an emotional idea that will touch people.
Brings emotions, exactly. That's a good answer, because my second question is about if you can do it, of course. Can you guide us through the process of creating a Pixar film from idea to the finished product? Because basically you have the idea. Where is the idea coming from? Like, do you have someone coming with, oh, I have a good idea. Can you do it?
To take you through the whole process is it's gonna take 5 years. So I hope you have a lot of
You have 5 years.
you have a lot of time on your recording there.
Yeah.
We start by asking somebody we believe may be a good storyteller to pitch us 3 ideas.
Okay.
And not because we need a selection so much, but we want them to not get stuck on any one thing.
And challenge the ideas, maybe.
Yeah, well, we do eventually, but we let them come to us and present 3 ideas, and if everything goes well, we'll select one, and we will then spend about a year going through the process of developing a treatment, an outline, a script, etc. And if everything goes well, at the end of that year, we'll have a working script that we'll then begin to work on. And at that point, there's about 4 more years to go to make one of these films. We take the script and we start storyboarding it, and we storyboard the entire film.
Okay.
And we photograph the storyboards, and then we do scratch acting voices. We have people at Pixar do the acting. We borrow, steal, make music to lay in. We add sound effects. So we make an incredibly rough version of the whole movie.
The movie exists before the movie.
The movie existed many times before the movie.
Yeah.
But the first time we do it, it's called the first story reels. And it's a very crude representation of the movie, but it's the whole movie in hand-drawn, very rough hand-drawn form. And then we screen that movie, and we realize how bad it is and how much work it's going to need to get it to the right place. And we start questioning why we started with that idea in the first place. But then we take it apart and we look at it and figure out what was working and what wasn't. We have all of the directors help with this. Everybody helps each other in Pixar on these films. We all work together on the films. And but the filmmaker then goes and starts that process over again. So in the normal course of making one of these films, we will do that process 8 to 10 times, where we make the whole film kind of over again in this rough form. 2 years after we start that storyboarding process, we start building assets and building characters and so forth in the computer. We have different people that do that. We have production designers that design the sets. We have character designers that design the characters, and we start to work on those, build those. In the last 2 years of making the film is actually when we do all the physical production. We actually make the shots that end up in the final film. And it starts with what we call the layout process, which is really our word for the camera department. In our, in movies, you always hear the phrase lights, camera, action.
Yeah.
But in animation, it's camera action lights.
Of
So
course.
we start with the camera, we lay out the shots, and we give the shots to the animators. The animators then animate within those shots, and sometimes there's some back and forth to make adjustments. When the animators are done animating those shots, it goes through other departments where we add the textures, the characters, the colors, the appearance. And then when we light the characters, we light them virtually really inside the computer. We then render at very high resolutions for the final big movie screen. And then the picture of the movie's done. Then we go through all the normal processes of composing music with a composer, or if there's songs, we create the songs. We do the sound post-production, we do the mixing, and do all the final finishing as you would on any project.
Like for live action,
Exactly
for
the same.
So will you say how many years from the idea to the final?
5.
5 years.
5 is our average.
5 is the average.
We've made some faster. I think 3.5 is the fastest.
Oh,
and
that's fast, yeah.
some have been 7.
The longest?
7.
7 years. Okay. But that's nice, 7 years, because it's a long, long word.
It's a long time.
I can't.
You could go to college and graduate school.
True.
You could probably have your medical degree in that period of time.
My third question. Pixar has a reputation for creating films that appeal to both children and adults. That's something really special for Pixar, I would say. How do you balance creating content that is entertaining and engaging for both audiences? Because it's really hard, you know?
Well, we approach it trying to make films we want to see, and films we want to see, but we would also take our family to. The other thing we've discovered over the years is everybody always feels like you have to make simplistic things for children. And the fact is, children are often far more perceptive than adults.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, and Chuck Jones, the famous animator who made all the Bugs Bunny commercials, when asked, who do you make your films for? And he said, well, we try to make our films sophisticated enough for children, but easy enough for adults to understand. And I think we kind of take that point of view. I think we find children are aspirational and they're looking to learn things. You don't need to talk down to children. But to answer your question, really, our films have fairly balanced audiences. About half the audience that comes to see them are family audiences, parents with children, and the other half roughly are general audiences, which are just, regular people. 18 to 35 is typically the most prominent group of those. So it varies from film to film. Sometimes it's a 60-40 split, 60% families, 40% families. Most animated films are not that way. Most animated films are far more family oriented. So typical film might be more like 90% for families and 10% for general audience. But I think we approach our filmmaking different. We don't see it as making films for children. We actually we make them for everybody. We call it the 4-quadrant audience: adult males, adult females, young males, young females. So that's our approach.
In recent years, there has been a shift in the industry towards digital streaming platforms, as you know, of course. How this affected Pixar's approach to content creation and distribution? Did you have an approach?
Well, it didn't affect our approach to our films. We always approach them the same way, for better or for worse. But we do. We don't do any audience research or anything. We come up with an idea we like and then support it and try to germinate it. But what did happen during COVID times, when theatrical audiences were not there, people weren't going to theaters.
No theaters.
We had 3 films released during COVID. The first one was Soul. And the second one was Luca, and the third was Turning Red. And on the one hand, we were glad that they all went to Disney Plus, which is Disney's streaming service. And they all did very well. They were all profitable on Disney Plus. And we were happy on the one hand that we had a platform to go to, given that the theaters were not exactly vibrant. On the other hand, we were disappointed because we made those movies for the big screen. They were meant to be seen that way with audiences and people. So we had kind of a mixed feeling about it. None of our films will go direct to streaming. They'll always go theatrical first. And
you still have like the distribution first, theaters, then platforms.
And our platform at this moment, at least, is Disney Plus. We're owned by Disney, so our films go to Disney
Directly
Plus.
to Disney Plus.
Yeah, after theatrical. So that's the plan now. And it's interesting because there was a feeling for a while that if films went straight to the streaming service, that they would enhance viewership on the streaming service. And it makes a little bit of sense, but that's not what we found in reality. What we found in reality is if you release a movie theatrically, it has a different social impact than if it just shows up on the streaming service.
Yeah.
So some of the films, our sister company, Disney Animation, Encanto was a great example. They released it theatrically. It had a theatrical run. Then it went to streaming, and it was huge on streaming.
Encanto,
yeah. I think it has like 500 million viewing hours or something now. So, and we had similar large viewing hours with the films we released directly to Disney Plus. But my point is that it didn't harm the streaming viewership to first have it go theatrical. If anything, it may have made it more interesting to people to see, or more vital for them to see because they'd heard about it or had seen it and want to see it again at home and so forth. So it's been an interesting dynamic we've discovered.
I have a question for you, but maybe you don't have the answer, but I can try.
Okay.
Pixar have produced some of the most iconic animated characters in film history. Do you agree?
Yes.
Which character do you think has resonated the most with audiences, and why?
I would say the duo of Buzz and Woody have resonated the most with characters, true. I think, as a pair. And then probably after that, the Incredibles family. I think just in terms of if you took a look at the mass appeal of it.
Exactly.
And then, of course, other people have individual characters or films that
like Wall-E, or maybe or Nemo, or
Wall-E's sort of unique if you think about it in Pixar, because it's a nonverbal character. The whole performance is through pantomime and acting, and he makes little noises, but he doesn't speak, and nor does Eve. Not really. So that's more almost more pure cinema in certain ways, because all of it's visual when you get down to it. But, if you ask different people, they will tell you different films that are their favorites.
Yeah, that's really
But I think those are the most impactful and some of the most beloved characters.
So one last question. Before joining Pixar, you worked at Industrial Light and Magic.
I did.
A really small company, huh? Not really. And you were involved in the visual effects of really small movies like Jurassic Park, Forrest Gump, Terminator 2. I think the list is like big.
I was like, you got to work on a lot of movies.
How did your experience working on these films inform you work at Pixar? And what lessons did you bring you to the animation industry? Like, did you use some of the tips and the workflow of this visual movies to work on Pixar?
Yeah, it's interesting. I started out as a kid doing little stop motion animated films, and then I went to film school and I studied animation as well as live action. In visual effects, over time, and even some of the films you mentioned, visual effects films and animated films started to have great similarities to them. If you think about it, Jurassic Park is successful among other reasons because it has these giant dinosaurs in them that you get to watch and see, but they're animated characters in the film. Terminator 2, the T-1000 character, the polyalloy Terminator character that morphs into different, metal forms and so forth. But those are all animation techniques. The techniques of computer graphics to create those characters in those films, and the techniques to create the films in Pixar are very similar. In fact, Ed Catmull, who was my boss at Pixar for a long time, invented many of those techniques when he was at Lucasfilm, because before Pixar was owned by George Lucas. And so those techniques informed what we did at ILM, but they also were techniques that they took and continued to do at Pixar. So much of what we were doing at ILM was computer graphics related. So much of the pipeline and thinking and so forth, even though we're making different types of films, were very compatible.
Great. So thank you, Jim, for answering all these questions and taking time to answer.
Of course.
I hope you will enjoy your stay in Belgium, and we would like to keep in touch for the incoming projects that are coming.
Terrific.
May the force be with you, Jim.
Thank you so much.